everybody, and welcome back to Odin's movie vlog. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today we'll be doing a box office update on this Thursday because we finally have the time where not only the Star Wars film Rise of Skywalker has gone below $1 million, it made only $627,000 in a day on Wednesday. $627,000. I didn't think I would ever see a Star Wars movie, and yes, it has been out for a decent while at this point in time, making that little in comparison to some of the other films that have come out previously in the Star Wars lineup. As I've been liking to show on the channel, I've been liking to do some day-to-day comparisons. So let's go ahead and see where, at the same time in its history, other films fell. So The Last Jedi obviously had a very massive drop-off at the first 2 weeks because the film, for lack of a better term, was terrible. It crapped all over the lore. It pissed off a lot of fans, and guess what? The fans reacted as such. Yeah, a lot of people showed up in the very beginning, but once it dropped off, it pretty much never recovered. Notice the last couple of days for The Rise of Skywalker. $950,000, $627,000. Now, as I've been trying to show recently, I think that a better film to compare it to as far as what the likely end result will be has been Rogue One: A Star Wars Story. But even when you bring Rogue One into the discussion, things just really don't look that much better for Rise of Skywalker, because Rogue One actually had some really decent legs. It actually made really decent money after its initial release because the word of mouth on that film was very good. A lot of people thoroughly enjoyed it, and so therefore it ended up... I know, River and Willow. Always interrupting my videos. But anyway, it had the ability to make up so much money after its initial release that it was able to make up for a relatively small, not so strong opening weekend in comparison to some of the other Star Wars films previously. Now, here's the thing though. It made almost twice as much at the same time in this history. Like, keep in mind, this was back in 2016 for Rogue One. That means that this number is before you adjust those numbers for inflation, meaning that it literally made twice as much on the same time and the same day of its release. On the 5th Wednesday of its release, Rogue One was making twice as much. It didn't fall below the $1 million mark until its 5th Thursday, which makes a lot of sense because Thursday is the premiere night for other films, and so therefore you're going to find a lot more drop-off. But even then, it barely fell below $1 million, and guess what? When you adjust this number for inflation, it gets that much closer and possibly even passes up the $1 million mark. I don't know where this film is going to drop because if you go ahead and look to these numbers, the 5th Thursday tends to be one of the lowest numbers in their run up until, of course, that weekend, and then, of course, you find a much steeper drop-off. If this movie already reached $627,000 on Thursday, there's a good chance that we might see this film get into possibly the $500,000s or repeat in the $600,000. And again, yes, it's been out for 5 weeks, but it's also a Star Wars movie. And it is falling more in line with the massive drop-offs of a film like The Last Jedi and the overall result domestically of Rogue One: A Star Wars Story, which, remember, at this point in time is now whooping its ass by $9 million before adjustment for inflation in the overall domestic numbers. Meaning that not only will Rise of Skywalker not match the number that Rogue One: A Star Wars Story made after inflation, but won't even match it before inflation either. Now, I know I've gone through this beforehand. I know that I've shown you the box office numbers at this point in time, and just want to remind everybody that at this point, Rise of Skywalker is profitable. It has made money. We talked about this the other day. We talked about how much money this film has made in comparison to other Star Wars films previously in the franchise. We talked about how the Disney trilogy at this point in time has not made back its money, about how Disney is still roughly $3 billion in the red for its initial purchase. Now, some people did make some pretty good deals saying, hey, the $4 billion that Disney got for Lucasfilm was a steal. And when you compare that to the $71 billion that they spent on, a property like Fox, for example, you could have an argument there. The difference, I would say, is that Fox, you could look to multiple franchises that is under the Fox brand versus Star Wars, which, hey, Lucasfilm, you only have one real brand there. So that would be my argument as to why the number was what it was. Plus, as we look to the current adjustment for inflation numbers, we know that Lucasfilm's purchase was actually closer to $4.5 billion in current modern 2020 numbers. With all that being said, though, Star Wars is at one of the worst places that it could possibly be right now. Yes, we got the Clone Wars trailer, and the Clone Wars trailer looks pretty damn good. Yes, the film reached the $1 billion number and is profitable, which is something that is not always a guarantee under Disney Star Wars, as we know from the $180 million loss that was Solo a Star Wars Story, hashtag Solo lost money. But now you've even got people in the media that at one point in time seemed like they were becoming a lot more honest with everything going on, who are now back to their shilling ways, saying, forget the bad news for Star Wars Rise of Skywalker, here is the good. There's been a lot of bad press surrounding the Rise of Skywalker's box office run so far, and admittedly, a fair share of it has come from me. After all, the Disney film joined $100 million Losers Club in dubious fashion. The movie's 91.5% plunge on its fourth weekend was the worst ever for a movie that made at least $175 million on an opening weekend. And last weekend saw The Last Star Wars drop 1,200 theaters, which is almost unheard of for a Star Wars film. So when we compare Rise of Skywalker with other blockbusters and films in the Star Wars franchise, maybe there are some things to complain about, but when we take the numbers at face value, The Rise of Skywalker has inarguably had an incredible run so far. So notice what they just did there. Notice the spin cycle on that. Oh, when you compare it to other blockbusters and specifically other Star Wars movies, it looks bad. But when you just take this as a regular film, maybe it's not as bad as we think. And that is the logic that is pervading the modern culture. That is the logic that is pervading the people trying to defend this movie, defend all the stuff that's been going on behind the scenes ever since The Last Jedi and prior to The Last Jedi, is they've been trying to treat Star Wars as if it is just like any other franchise, as if it is just like any other story. Well, I can tell you as someone that just recently finished the book Darth Plagueis, which, by the way, is an amazing novel. It is freaking fantastic. I highly recommend the audiobook. It takes a little while to get into because it is definitely probably one of the densest Star Wars novels that I've read so far, or in this case, listened to audiobook-wise. But it is freaking brilliant, and it makes me wonder why the hell they didn't just make that story, make that movie. You could even have made technically that into its own trilogy based off of all the stuff and all the lore that they have in that book. Why didn't they just start off with that? But of course, Disney's Kathleen Kennedy is the one that goes out and says, oh, we didn't have any source material. We had nothing to go off of. There was no EU or comics or anything like that. Says Kathleen Kennedy, of course, and of course anyone with a brain understands, oh, are you kidding me? We obviously know that that is not true. But reading things like that and understanding just how rich the lore of Star Wars is, having read the very few books of the EU that I actually have read, playing the games, right? Seeing some of the gameplay. Again, Anna, that Star Wars girl, playing Star Wars Old Republic. All of these things that have been a part of Star Wars and have been a part of the universe for so long that it is so much richer and so much more than just your typical franchise, than just your typical blockbuster. The fact that now the only way that they can try and spin this in a positive for Star Wars, again, enough of the bad, here's the good, they literally have to take the film out of its own universe and compare it to other films outside of it, including, by the way, at the very end, films like, oh, you know, don't feel too bad because Shrek 2, Hobbit, The Battle of the Five Armies, Dark Knight Rises, those films didn't do as well as the previous. Notice how plenty of other movies have fallen prey to being the last film curse. And those are the films that you're going to mention? Shrek the Third? Hobbit 3? Dark Knight Rises? Again, Dark Knight Rises is arguably the best of all of those movies, by the way, just for the record. But really, you're going to try and throw in films that are not really that great? Star Wars is so much more of that. Star Wars should be more than the Dark Knight trilogy. Let's just be honest for a second. I know that might piss some people off, but Star Wars should be in its own league. And now we've gotten to the point where you're comparing it, saying, hey, it's not as bad when you compare it to other franchises that really aren't all that great to the first place or really had terrible endings. Great, so you're saying that this had a terrible ending, but you're trying to spin it as a positive. Okay, I see what you did there. But notice where we are. We're at a state where a film making millions, hundreds of millions of dollars less than its predecessors is a good thing. That Kathleen Kennedy, up until this point, has not yet been fired is a miracle. When the fact that, yes, they spent only $4.5 billion on the actual purchase of Lucasfilm, but since 2012, they have yet to make that money back, at least when it comes to their films. At least when it comes to the overall films. And when you compare trilogy to trilogy, and I can't wait to make this video breaking down the numbers more fully, I want you all to realize that the prequel trilogy, which a lot of people still crap on to this day, I being one of them, I'm very critical of the story of that, When you look at the overall net gains and net profits between the prequel trilogy and the Star Wars Disney trilogy, Disney's trilogy only makes a few million more. Really, honestly, go ahead. You can actually, if you want to see the numbers already, go over to ombreviews.home.blog, check out the box office tracking, and I have the entire Star Wars breakdown there. And you can see I have all of the trilogies compared to each other. OT obviously wins out the day. OT trilogy made well over $2 billion in net profit, in net gain after you take out cost, marketing, things like that. And of course, the take that studios normally get and the theaters normally get. The fact that the prequel trilogy, though, which has been the bane of Star Wars' existence for a long time now, is now just barely less profitable than the Disney Star Wars. The fact that this has the Disney machine behind it and it was still only able to make just a little bit more than the prequel trilogy as far as net gains and net profits go, how can you possibly spin that as good? Oh, wait, that's right. You have to literally take it out of its own universe in order for you to have any good to say about it. But anyway, what are your thoughts about this? I know that I have spent a lot of time on the channel talking specifically about the Rise of Skywalker box office, but as you all know, I'm a Star Wars fan. I love Star Wars. That's why I've been falling in love, really, into the EU, into the extended universe, into the now so-called Legends, which in my mind is definitely better as headcanon than any of this crap that they claim to be canon, right? Many of us have said, read some people in the comments say, guess what? This is not canon to me. And guess what? When they are crapping all over canon, guess what? It's not hard to ignore it. It's not hard to say, yeah, I'm just going to ignore this as canon. But people like Travis Bean and Scott Mendelson, it's so funny that they were so honest in the very beginning when it came to this film not being the great film that a lot of people said it was. The fact that Rotten Tomatoes still to this day, after 90,000 reviews, has the audience score stuck at 86%. And I've been critical, actually, of people that have gone after that number because I did a live stream where I covered that number, and it did change a couple percentage points in the time period that many people said that it stayed at 86%. Only by 1 or 2 points, so still pretty fishy nonetheless. But the fact that it's still at that same number, and also when you look at the other number, which is supposed to be the raw number, which has more reviews, and it's the non-verified one, also has been stuck around 78% or so for a very long time now, you start to make these connections. You start to realize maybe, just maybe, these companies, these media types, are in bed with Disney, are in bed with these giant studios. And it really isn't that hard to make those types of connections. But let me know your thoughts about that and everything I'm talking about in the comment section below. If you like this video, smash the like button, give me a subscribe, helps me a lot. Also, I want to give a huge shout out to JJ. I don't think I gave him a shout out yesterday, but he was the one that gave me the idea to put all of the box office numbers for all the Star Wars films together to break into, how much they've made, what the net profit, net gains are, comparing it to the original Star Wars films, adjusting those films for inflation, all that kind of stuff. That was JJ's original idea. So huge shout out to you, good sir, for doing that. I really do appreciate it. Anyway, you guys are all amazing, beautiful people. Have a wonderful day, and as always, God bless. And now I want to give a shout out to my January Patreon members: animation commentator Brian P, Dion, Divex, Elizabeth M, Enrique Evangelista, Fan Addicts of Film, Father Christopher Miller, Hail Father, Frank the Tank and the Shawhan Wiener Dog Clan, Harold Francis, the Hunky Chunky Funky Monkey, Inflamed Wood, It's a Trap Productions, Jason Clark, Jeffrey Toon, J.J. Jonathan Jerembeck, Lady T, Mad Mitch Dunaway, Mr. Peabody and his evil twin, Orange Hat Reviews, Outpost Dyer, Perpetual Punster, Riff Magos, Rosetta Allen, Sir Lanceloto, Theodore Bendon, The DJD Show, Those Two Ball Guys, and Tina B. and Sharon Ferguson. Sharon! Thank you so much for being Patreon members. And of course, to my Subscribe Star peeps, Larry, Mr. Roy, Glinzer, G2Cool99, Darkstar57, J. Alex McCarthy Jr., US 888209 Fast, Dean Heiss, Harold Francis, J-Rod the Beer Guru, Nebalan G. Adams, and ZK Man. Thank you so much for supporting me this month. You guys freaking rock. And a special new shout out to Jeff Lebowski and Steve Glasker. God bless.